Welcome dear students to another part of our class, Standard 6th English 1, and this is part 4. Part 4 because already I have taught the first lesson Miracle in 2 parts, and the third one was a poem, the Summerson, and this is lesson number 2, the cherry tree, the next lesson, lesson number chapter 2. It is also written by Ruskin Bond. This lesson is written by Ruskin Bond. Now what is this cherry tree? Now you all know what it is a tree. It is about a tree. We are going to learn about a tree. So I'll explain you in short the story of this lesson. It is about a boy named Rakesh who starts growing a cherry tree with the seed he has sown. So when he sowed the seed, it was nothing so special about but the gradual growth, everyday growth. When he saw the tree growing, and when the tree grew into a big, seed grow into a big tree, it started giving fruits. So it was such a heavenly experience for him. He felt as himself as a god, that he created something. So that was a divine feeling for him. So this story is about the process of growing the seed into a plant, the cherry tree seed into a plant. So let's go and see how they enjoyed the growing of the cherry tree. See. One day when Rakesh was 6, he walked home from Mussoorie Bazaar eating cherries. They were a little sweet, a little sour, small, bright cherries, which had come all the way from the Kashmir Valley. Now, one day when he was coming back from school, he bought some cherries and he was eating it along the way home. So on the way he was eating, how was the taste of the cherry tree? It was little sweet, little sour, like that. Here in the Himalayan foothills where Rakesh lived, there were not many fruit trees. Now where did Rakesh live? Rakesh lived in the Himalayan foothills. Foothills मतलब हिमालय का जो पेड़ होता, जो पहाड़ होता है उसके सटे पे रहता था, ठीक है, foothills पे. The soil was stony and the dry cold winds stunned the growth of most plants, but on the more sheltered slopes there was forest of oak and deodar. But at the same time, little going after that, when the slope was okay, when there was soil, there was thick forest of oak tree and deodar tree. They are very good trees used for making furnitures. Okay. So, but actually where Rakesh lived in that area, there were not much fruit trees and all. Why? Because the soil was very stony ground it was. So it prevented the growth of trees, and also there were not at all much trees or fruit trees or anything. Rakesh lived with his grandfather on the outskirts of Mussoorie, just where the forest began. Grandfather was a retired forest ranger. He had a little cottage outside the town. So now Rakesh lived with his grandfather in the Mussoorie outer side, not in the town. They were living out of the town, near where the forest begins, where the forest starts to begin. So why they lived there? Because our grandfather was a retired forest ranger. He was a forest ranger. And after his retirement, he got a cottage there and they started living there, and Rakesh was living along with his grandfather. Rakesh was on his way home from school when he bought the cherries. He paid 50 paise for the bunch. It took him about half an hour to walk home, and by the time he reached the cottage, there were only 3 cherries left. Now he bought a bunch of cherries. In the starting it was mentioned the taste and all of the cherries. So when he was walking home from school, on that way he bought from the market a bunch of cherries for 50 paise, and almost he ate everything, and when he reached home he had only 3 cherries in his hand. How many cherries? 3 cherries. Hey, have a cherry, grandfather, he said as soon as he saw a grandfather in the garden. When he reached home, his grandfather was sitting in the garden. So he just offered his grandfather, would you like to have a cherry? And he offered 1 cherry and ate promptly other 2 cherries. He put it in his mouth. See, grandfather took 1 cherry and Rakesh promptly ate the other 2. He kept the last seed in his mouth for some time, rolling it round and round on his tongue until all the tang had gone. Then he placed the seed on his palm of his hand and studied it. Now he ate the 2 cherries and he was like, tanging it out. After that, the tang was all gone. The flavor of all the cherry has gone, and only the dry seed was there in his mouth. So he took out the seed in his hand. He started observing, and he asked his grandfather, "Is cherry tree called lucky?" Yes, grandfather said, "Yes, of course it's lucky, but nothing is lucky if it is not put into any use." See now what is, I'll read it for you. "Are cherry seeds lucky?" asked Rakesh. "Of course, then I will keep it. Nothing is lucky if you put it away. If you want luck, you must have put it into some use." So what grandfather told? The grandfather told him that nothing is lucky if you कोई भी चीज़ लकी नहीं है यदि तुम उसको अपने पास ऐसे बना के रखोगे तो. इफ़ यू वांट सम लक यू हैव टू सो इट और यू हैव टू पुट इट इनटू सम यूज, अदरवाइज ओनली इट इज़ लक. What can I do with the seed? Plant it. So Rakesh found a small spade and began to dig up a flower bed. Now, so quickly as soon as grandfather told him to plant it, उसको plant कर दो, तो he took a spade and started to digging a flower place in the ground. So at that time what grandfather said, "Hey, not that," said grandfather. "I have sown mustard in that bed. Plant it in that shady corner where it won't be disturbed." So grandfather told him that already I have planted mustard seed. Rai ke dane मैंने वहाँ बोए हैं, तो you don't plant that. You plant somewhere in, and he showed him some another corner, a shady corner, so it won't be disturbed. It will be in a corner and it will grow smoothly. वो अपने आप आराम से वहाँ growth होएगा, ठीक है. Rakesh went to the corner of the ground where the earth was soft. He did not have to dig. He pressed the seed into the soil with his thumb and it went right in. So he did not have to struggle with too much with the spade. उस spade के साथ उसको ज़्यादा मेहनत करना नहीं पड़ा क्योंकि ground बहुत soft था, तो उसने just हाथ से उसको दबाया and it went inside the ground. So he planted the cherry tree. Then he had his lunch and ran off to play cricket with his friends and forgot all about the cherry tree. Now as soon as he planted it, then he just watered something and he went out to play. As a normal child, he went out to play with his friends to cricket and all, and he forgot all about the cherry tree. By the time the climate also changed, the season also changed. When it was winter in the hills, a cold wind blew down from the snows and went woo-woo in the deodorant trees, and the garden was dry and bare. In the evening, grandfather and Rakesh sat over a charcoal fire, and grandfather told Rakesh stories about people who turned into animals, and in turn Rakesh would read to him from the newspaper. Grandfather's eyesight being rather weak, Rakesh found the newspaper very dull, especially after the stories, but grandfather wanted all the news. Now what was it? Actually winter started, they can't go out and play, they can't go out. So grandfather and Rakesh, they used to sit near the charcoal fire. चारकोल मीन्स कोयले के आग के सामने वो लोग बैठते थे, तो वो क्या करते थे, ग्रैंडफादर को एक इच्छा था कि मतलब उसको ग्रैंडफादर राकेश को बड़ी बड़ी मस्त मस्त कहानियाँ सुनाते थे, जैसे जो ह्यूमन बींग्स आके एनिमल्स में टर्न हो जाते हैं, ऐसे फैंटेसी वाले स्टोरीज. इन रिटर्न राकेश को क्या करना पड़ता था, ही हैज़ टू रीड द newspaper for grandfather because his eyesight was very poor due to old age. He lost his eyesight, was not very clear, so he has to read the whole newspaper because grandfather wanted all the news. Okay, so it was very boring for Rakesh. He felt very boring because after hearing the interesting stories of fantasy and all, he didn't like to read the newspaper, but he can't say no because grandfather wanted all the news. They knew it was spring when the wild duck flew north again to Siberia. Early in the morning, when he got up to chop wood and light a fire, Rakesh saw a V-shaped formation screaming northwards and heard the calls of the birds clearly through the thin mountain air. Now as soon as the climate has changed, how they come to know, because the wild ducks and all, they used to fly from this area to another country. They used to fly to Siberia in a V shape. You might have seen some, but sometimes in the sky here also we see the V-shaped birds flying from one city to another city in that way. One day in the garden, he went to pick up what he thought was a small twig and found to his surprise that it was well rooted. He stared at it for a moment, then ran to fetch grandfather, calling, Dada, come and look, the cherry tree has come up. Now one day when he was cleaning the garden, when he was cleaning that, he was removing the twig मतलब जो unwanted जो grass होते हैं या जो sticks grow होते हैं, जो plants grow होते हैं, उसको twigs बोलते हैं. तो एक दिन जब राकेश clean कर रहा था इसको, तो he saw something like a twig, so he started to pull it out. So what he found that it was well rooted, वो एकदम मजबूत है rooted हुआ. तो and when he clearly gave a look, उसने इसको साफ तरीके से देखा, तो what he saw, the cherry tree, the cherry seed which he has planted has grown into a plant, has grown into a small plant, and it was well rooted. So he shoutingly called his Dada, come and see, the cherry seed which we have planted has grown into a plant. What cherry trees? Asked grandfather, who had forgotten about it. The seed we planted last year, look, it's come up. Now last year they have planted and now it's have come and they have forgotten all about it. उन्होंने पिछले साल रखा था और दादा और राकेश बिल्कुल उसके बारे में भूल चुके थे, ठीक है. Rakesh went down on his haunches while grandfather bent almost double and peered down at the tiny tree. It was about 4 inches high. Now how much is 4 inches high? It was almost like this high. It was 4 inches high. And Rakesh took on his haunches. Means what is the meaning of haunches? Haunches मतलब ऐसे अपने हाथों को अपने घुटने में रख के ऐसे देखने को, इसको haunches बोलते हैं. He was standing on his haunches and looking at the plant while grandfather's doubled, मतलब he almost sat down to look at the tree. ठीक है. Yes, it's a cherry tree, said grandfather. You should water it now and then. Now what grandfather recognized? No, it's the cherry tree only, confirm. So you have to water now and then and see how it grows. Rakesh ran indoor and came back with a bucket of water. Don't drown it, said grandfather. Rakesh gave it a sprinkling and circled it with pebbles. Now as soon as grandfather ने जैसे ही बोला इसको वाटर दो, तो राकेश अंदर गया और पूरा एक बकेट भर के पानी लेके आया. तो दादाजी ने बोला इतना पानी नहीं, तो इसको पूरा डुबा मत दो, जस्ट स्प्रिंकल सम वाटर. और उसके बाद उसने क्या किया, स्प्रिंकल किया और उसको पेबल्स यानी जैसे मार्बल्स होते हैं ना, पत्थर जब मिलते हैं वाइट कलर के, ऐसा वो मार्बल से उसने उसको सर्कल करके रखा, उस एरिया को सर्कल कर दिया, ठीक है. He looked at the tree every morning, but it didn't seem to be growing very fast. As he stopped looking at it, except quickly out of the corner of his eyes, after a week or two, when he allowed himself to look at it properly, he found that it had grown at least an inch. So every day he used to now look at the tree, but he couldn't find. वो ऐसा लग ही नहीं था कि ट्री ग्रो हो रहा है करके, उसको लगता ही नहीं था. तो दादाजी उसे ये क्या करता था, बीच बीच में से चुपके से चोरी चोरी नज़र से देखता था. फिर जब ऐसा 1 हफ्ता 2 हफ्ते के बाद जब देखता था, उसको ही कुड सी दैट लिटिल चेंज इन द tree, that it has grown little big. That year the monsoon rains came early and Rakesh plodded to and from the school in raincoats and gumboots. Ferns sprang from the trunks of the tree. Strange looking lilies came up in the long grass, and even when it wasn't raining, the tree dripped and mist came curling up the valley. The cherry tree grew quickly in this season. Now as soon as the rainy season came, the cherry tree started growing little big, and it was growing fast in this rainy season. It was about 2 feet high when a goat entered the garden and ate all the leaves. Only the main stem and 2 thin branches remained. Now when at that time what happened, one day एक goat अंदर आ गया. एक दिन क्या हो गया, goat अंदर आ गया. उसने क्या किया, लीफ पूरा खा लिया. सिर्फ 2 स्टेम और एक ब्रांच, सिर्फ मेन ब्रांच रह गया और मेन स्टेम्प रह गया और 2 ब्रांचेस रह गए. बाकी सबको इसने, गोट ने क्या कर लिया, खा लिया. तो राकेश फेल्ट द ट्री हैज गॉन, द ट्री हैज गॉन. Never mind, said grandfather. After seeing that, Rakesh was upset. It will grow again. The cherry trees are tough. तो दादाजी क्या बोलते हैं, चेरी ट्रीज बहुत टफ होते हैं, वो ज़रूर बढ़ जाएगा, तो फिक्र मत कर करके. Towards the end of the rainy season, leaves appeared on the tree. Then a woman cutting grass cut the cherry in two. Now after some time what happened, this cherry tree again it started growing. But one day when one lady when she came to cut grass from the garden, उसने क्या किया, unknowingly she cut the cherry tree into two. Two in the means only now the stem was remaining, all the branches had gone. Now Rakesh was fully disturbed. He thought my cherry plant has gone. See, when grandfather saw what had happened, he went after the woman and scolded her, but the damage could not be repaired. Maybe it will die now, said Rakesh. Maybe, said grandfather. Now they thought that surely this tree may die now. Now let's see how it, whether it grows or not grows in the next part. So this is the end of our today's section. We shall continue with our subject tomorrow. Okay, take care children. Thank you.